I'm fully aware that this was a lot of new information about components, props, and events. The key takeaway, of course, is that props are there to send data into a component and events are there to send data out of a component, you could say. Now let's practice this together. You will later also have an assignment which you do on your own, but let's start together. And let's add a brand new component to this app and a brand new functionality as well. Because at the moment, our friends here are fairly static. We got an array with 2 friends, and yes, isFavorite is able to change, but we got no way of adding or deleting friends here. And that is a feature I'd like to add to this demo application. So therefore, we'll add a new component that allows us to enter the data for a new friend, so the name, the phone, and the email address, let's say, and then I want to be able to confirm that data, and that data should be added here. Now we could absolutely add this form here. Let's say below the header, we could add a form, and in here, we could then add our inputs, like this. And we could then also add proper styling and make sure that we got all the input elements we need. And whenever data is entered and confirmed, we added this array of friends. This would work, but it is exactly not what you should do. Instead of having large view files with a lot of logic in there, you should have multiple, smaller, specialized components instead, and then build your UI by combining these components. So in reality, we would not add the form here, but instead in the components folder, we would add a new component. New friend could be the component name. So I'll name the file newfriend.view. And in there, we would add our template again and our script section. And we would create that form and handle the user input in this component and then just emit a custom event once everything is confirmed to the app.view file and pass all the entered data on to app.view. Now, definitely feel free to try this on your own. Here's your chance to pause the video and implement this on your own, but thereafter we'll do this step by step together to practice this component concept and also the props and the custom events concept. Nonetheless, if you want to try it on your own, here's your chance to pause the video. So, were you successful? Let's now try it together. In newfriend.view, I'll add a form, a default HTML element therefore, and in here I now want to have various inputs. So I'll add an input of type text for the name, and maybe also add a label where we say name. And then I will repeat that a couple of times here. I'll actually also put each label input set into a separate div to make it easier to tell them apart. So here we also have an input for the phone number then. And here we can set the type to tel because we want to get a telephone number here. And here we got the email address and we can set the type to email to get an email address. And that's all regular HTML. Below that, let's say we have another div, and in there we have our button where we say add contact. And since this button is inside of a form, when it's clicked, that form will be submitted. Now here in the script tags, I'll export a default JavaScript object which will hold the configuration for this component, but for the moment it's empty. We'll add more later. And in main.js, we can now import this component. We can import the new friend component from /components newfriend.view and register this as a component with app component new-friend could be our custom HTML tag. Keep in mind that it should be a 2-word tag with a dash between the words. And new friend is our component configuration, even though it currently is an empty object. But the template will already be picked up. And therefore in app.view, here between header and unordered list, we can add our new friend component, opening and closing. And if we do that, we see our form here. Now the styling is not super beautiful, so I will tweak that a bit in the style tags in the app.view file. And in the end, I will just reuse the styling I used for list items. So here I will target the form element with that as well. And now we have this form. Now it's still not super pretty when it comes to the labels and the inputs. So for that, I'll quickly add some new styling, but I don't want to bore you with that. So attached you find a form.css file which contains these styles, which I'll add here. And now with these 3 styles added to the style tags, this is what you should see on the screen. So now this is our own component, a brand new form component, which allows us to enter data for the name, the phone number, and the email address, and then click Add Contact. So now for the logic. Which props do we need here? Well, I would say we need no props, because this component will gather some user data, and eventually it should provide that to app.view, but it doesn't really need any external data. So I don't see any props which we would need here at the moment. But as I just said, we'll definitely need to emit an event. And therefore I'll already add the emits property and add an event name of my choice here, or of your choice, of course, in your case. And I'll name it add-contact, because that's the kind of event we'll emit here. But you can also pick a different name, any name that makes sense to you. I will also add my data property here and manage some component-specific data. So data that is required by this component. And here essentially I want to store what the user enters as a name, as a phone number, and as an email address. And therefore I'll just add 3 data properties here. Entered name, which initially is an empty string, entered phone, which initially is an empty string, and you guessed it, entered email. And I will bind these data properties with vModel. So here vModel is bound to entered name. Here I'll bind the phone number input with vModel to entered phone, and the email with vModel to entered email, so that with every keystroke we store what the user enters. I'll also listen to the submit event on the form with @submit, and I will use the prevent modifier to ensure that when this is submitted, we prevent the browser default, which would lead to the page being reloaded, which is not what I want. I want to handle this fully inside the running Vue application. Here we can point at a method of our choice, and I'll name the method submitData. But again, it's your code, your method. You can name it however you want. But we do have to add that method, of course. So here, after data, we add methods to this new friend component config object. And there I'll add the submitData method, which now will be triggered when the form is submitted. And here I have one simple thing which I want to do. I want to emit my custom add-contact event so that I can forward that data to whoever is listening to that custom event, which later will be the app.view file. So here we use this $emit and then emit add-contact. So the custom event I'm announcing here, basically. And we forward this entered name, this entered phone, and this entered email. You could also group this together into an object and just emit one argument therefore, or like I'm doing it here, emit 3 arguments. And now we can go to app.view and listen to this custom event on the new friend component with add-contact, and then point at a method which we need to define here. And I'll name that method add contact as well. But again, this name is up to you. It doesn't have to be the same one as we used for the event. These two don't have to be the same. So now down in methods, I'll add contact, and we expect 3 parameters here because we're emitting 3 pieces of data: the name, the phone number, the email. So here I expect to get name, phone, and email. These parameter names are up to you, but the order of course matters because it's the same order as specified here when we emit the event. And then here we can create a new friend contact, which should be a new JavaScript object, which now has the same structure as our dummy starting objects. So name, phone, and email, but also an ID and also a isFavorite property. Now we can generate a pseudo unique ID by, for example, using the current date, which we can get like this in JavaScript, and converting that to an ISO string so that we basically have a string that reflects the current timestamp, which is not perfectly unique, but unique enough for now. And then we can set our other data properties, like the name, which we set equal to the name we're getting here. So that's the property name in this object. This here, on the right side of the colon, is referring to the name argument we're getting. And I'm going to do the same here for phone and email. And that I picked the same names for the arguments as I did for the properties is a pure coincidence. You don't have to do that, of course. But the property names should be the same ones as in your dummy objects because you're referring to those properties here when you're setting values for the props of the friend contact component. Now we also need the isFavorite property here, and let's say that's false as a default. Now we got that new friend contact, and now we can reach out to this friends, so to our friends data property, which we have in our app config object here. So reach out to this friends and push the new friend contact here, this newly created object. And with all of that in place, if we save that, I should be able to enter a new contact here, click add contact, and here he is. Here's Max with the data I just entered, working like the other components. So that's now working. We're able to add our own contact, and we're doing that with help of a new component, the new friend component, which also is using custom events.